Okay, looks like I'm on. Good to see you all this morning or evening or wherever you are. Well, this is, I believe, now my third Sunday talk on Zoom. So um, I'm not sure if I'm used to it yet or not, but anyway, here we are. Um, well, this morning I thought I'd just kind of look at this situation that we're in once again. And maybe we can look at this in a little different way. This situation, of course, is that around the world, we're all somewhat quarantined, and we're all dealing with something that seems to be rather new, this novel virus that has spread around the world through the human population. And it does seem new in many ways. But in another way, this is what I want to explore this morning, we can say that we've always been here. We've always been in this place. We've always been in this situation. And while this is true that this is new, it's novel, it's never happened before quite like this, at least in the human population, certainly not in modern times. But at the same time, we're still in the same situation we've always been in. And that might not seem to make sense in the world of this and that, the relative world of the samsaric world of birth and death and coming and going. It seems new moment after moment after moment. It's the eternal now, it's always thus, but at the same time, in any given moment, it seems like this is new, this is different. Everything is changing. And we acknowledge this in our teachings and in our practice. How can we deny it? But at the same time, there is this other aspect that lies hidden. For those of you who might be taking the course I'm teaching right now on the two truths, maybe you're hearing echoes of this right now. And you're correct in hearing that if you are, because the two truths really run throughout not only all of our wisdom teachings, it actually is the backdrop of the experience, the life that we're living out from moment to moment. And, so this is not, well, the two truths certainly isn't something new, but perhaps our way of looking at the world and our experience here might reveal something that might seem new to us. And that is that we're always here. We're always in this place, even if new and novel and strange, sometimes glorious and wonderful, sometimes terrifying and frightening circumstances come along. Sometimes they'll seem to just envelop ourselves as individuals, or maybe those close to us. Now it seems like we're maybe not as frequently, but it seems like we're dealing with something that's really, we're all caught up in it in one way or another. And it would also seem perhaps to many of us, that bad times are upon us right now, what with COVID-19, and perhaps we're very anxious about this. Maybe we're looking for better times, wishing we could have better times, or perhaps that better times will come back, or that we can, well, this is, since it's so global, it might be difficult for us to even imagine going to a better place, but certainly perhaps a better time, say 6 months ago, when we didn't even know about this virus. And can't we get that back? Can we do things to bring that back? This is how we would typically operate really with anything that we experience, whether it's good or bad. If it's something that we deem as good, we'd like to get it back. If it's something terrible, we want to get rid of it and keep it away. But this situation doesn't change. And as for the difficult times that are upon us now, yeah, the COVID situation that we're dealing with, that can change over time, and maybe we'll find a vaccine, all of those things. And viruses do tend to become less lethal over time once they're introduced to a new population of some kind, new species. That's very typical of viruses. They don't tend to become stronger and more lethal and that sort of thing as time goes on. It's quite the opposite, really. So those signs of optimism there, perhaps, dealing with this immediate situation that we're in, but what appears to be the immediate situation that we're in. But the situation we're always in is going to be bringing up difficulties like this, whether on a large scale or a small scale, at the personal scale. So this is something that we're always going to be dealing with. And there is a way to face this and to deal with this and to live with this that most of us never pick up on because we're always concerned with the immediate circumstance that's confronting me right now. It's usually, we look at it from that point of view. And as a result of that, well, the amount of things that we can turn to and reach for to help us, to put us at ease and to make us feel better is rather limited, and ultimately doesn't really work to accomplish what it is that we might be trying to get from the various things that we might reach for and try to take up. And so we just kind of go on like this. Maybe we get over one crisis only to be confronted with another further down the road. Another thing I think for people in our times, and maybe with this particular incident that has now hit virtually all of us, I think we can maybe start to look at the possibility that given the way we have treated this planet and each other and ourselves, and these kinds of times, these difficult times probably aren't going to abate. You know, they'll change. Maybe it won't always be the COVID virus. It could be some other communicable disease or something like that. But it could be just simply the collapse of the environment, which we're all looking at now is just kind of teetering on the edge. Heard a report not too long ago that the West Antarctic ice sheet is getting very close to collapsing. And that could happen at any time. That's enough to raise the oceans 10 feet. And, you know, so other kinds of things besides this virus might be, you know, coming our way. Well, what are we going to do about this? I mean, of course, we'll think, well, can't we stop that from happening in Antarctica? Well, of course, this is coming from global warming, which is something that's taking place over decades and centuries, really, these slow changes in the climate that we've now been contributing to in terms of the warming. And it isn't going to stop on a dime or turn around. And, you know, so we're probably, want to just, you know, face the situation we're in. We are in a pretty difficult situation in the sense that the way things have been for us for most of our lives, it's very likely not going to be the same world for us going forward. And our children and grandchildren won't really know the planet that we have known. And this is a very, very real possibility. And maybe more and more of us are beginning to take this seriously. But again, there's a way to, you know, face this, which very few of us ever even discover that there is some way to deal with this, and it's quite maybe counterintuitive, and perhaps that's why so few of us seem to find it. But it is right there in our teachings, and in speaking of the two truths, which we tend not to notice, And this is what one of the things we'll be examining in the class. We have been and will continue to. And I'll give more examples of this. I'm providing you with an example right now of what I'm going to be saying this morning. That it's in our teachings. I'm going to turn to one here in a few minutes, but that deal with this head on, even though unless it's spelled out, we might not notice it. This is really talking about the two truths here. But it's because there are these two truths, and we're normally just caught up with the one truth, the relative truth of this and that, and self and other, and all of this, trying to fix up our problems in the realm that is the realm of the relative, the samsaric realm, the world of coming and going, birth and death, all of this. We spend all of our time there and we don't notice that right there with it is something else taking place. It's not a greater truth. Someone wrote to me this past week, I'll be talking about that in the class tomorrow night, spoke of this other truth, the absolute, we could say, as somehow greater than the relative. That's not really the way to look at this. It is that these two truths are right here together. They're not separated in any way whatsoever. They're right here in the same place at the same time, all unfolding. Well, one appears to unfold, the other one doesn't. And that would be the absolute. But it is right here within the circumstances that we're always in. And this is what I want to draw our attention to now. And I think a good example that can bring this out is one that came to mind when I was thinking about giving another talk along these lines, given the situation that we're all in today. Story came to mind. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with it. This is the story of, what does it say here? I have a Tangshan's No Colder Heat. It's the 43rd case of the Blue Cliff record. I've talked on this before at length, and in the collection of commentaries I have on the Blue Cliff record, it's in there. And I won't be going into it in the detail that I did there. I'm only going to be touching on one small aspect of this case. Because I think it can be brought into immediate relevance to the situation that we're all in today. Well, let me just give you the case here. Again, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. A monk asked Tangshan, when cold and heat come, how can we avoid them? Shan said, why not go to where there is no cold or heat? The monk said, what is the place where there is no cold or heat? Tangshan said, when cold, let cold kill you. When hot, let heat kill you. There's other versions of this where he says, when cold, just be cold through and through. And when hot, just be hot through and through. Now, of course, cold and heat, we could apply this directly to cold and heat, certainly. But what is being asked here is when in this place where this all-pervading circumstance around me, it's hot or it's cold, it's unbearably hot or unbearably cold, or just sitting here in my meditation in an unheated building and it's cold, it's chilly, just sitting there. It's uncomfortable and it's all pervading. What can we do about it? Here we are, we have the COVID virus. It's spread everywhere. And we don't quite know what to do about it. We don't even know what course it might take. We have virologists and others who study these things and they have some pretty good ideas, but nobody really knows for sure exactly what course this is going to take or how the virus might change and travel. So it's all kind of, well, it's a big unknown for us. And seemingly of a very, has a potential to have a great impact on all, it already has, but maybe more so. But so here we are, the cold or heat, or any other kind of circumstances. You really don't want, this is difficult to deal with this. I don't want it. What can we do? And of course, when it comes to something like cold or heat, well, even the ancients, even our forebears of before we were Homo sapiens, knew about fire, and we could heat things, and we discovered somewhere along the way, no doubt, if we could get that fire into a kind of an enclosed space, you can kind of warm it up a little bit. So we can do things to modify that. And of course, over the eons of time, since our earliest days with fire, we found all kinds of elaborate ways to warm ourselves and to make other kinds of uses of heat for cooking and driving automobiles and all sorts of things. Cold, dealing with the cold came along a little later. It involves a little bit more, well, it would involve some science and study and all of this, but it's a way we discovered that we can pump heat out of a enclosed space, whether it's a refrigerator or our house with air conditioning. So there are ways that we can work with many of these things that are going on in the relative world, the world of hot and cold and birth and death and all of that coming and going, you and me. But still, there's still cold, there's still heat, and you might not always be able to work with the circumstances to make it so you're comfortable in each moment. But there's something else going on here that we tend not to look at, because if we're concerned with cold or heat or the coronavirus or whatever it might be, we get so focused on that. And of course, there's many things there we certainly have to deal with. All the people that are dying and the fact that we can't get enough tests. There's just all sorts of factors here that we certainly can be working on and improving and making use of, no doubt about that. But what Tangshan here draws the monks' attention to is this other truth. I mean, what we've been discussing there is a relative truth, a relative situation. And there's things we can do. None of them will be, well, for the most part, they won't be total. They're always connected with other factors that will vary and change over time. And sometimes we might call it our benefit, other times not. Though, as I've discussed elsewhere too, it's difficult to always be sure what exactly is to our benefit and what isn't. But this is the relative world. This is where we spend our time. But there's this other aspect of our lives and what we're living out from moment to moment. And it's called the absolute. And this is what Tangshan refers to here right away. When the monk says, well, when heat and cold come, basically, what can we do? How can we avoid them? He says. Maybe you can't always do that exactly, avoid them out there in the relative world. But Shan said, why not go to the place where there's no cold or heat? What place is this? Well, it is the place that I've already mentioned right at the very start. I think I said that we've always been in this place. Of course, this is the relative world. We could say, yeah, we've always been in the relative world. Actually, that's not really true, however. But we've always been here. It's always been here and now. We've never known. It is impossible to even really to imagine something other than here and now. We might think we can imagine such a thing, but it is impossible to experience such. But it is always thus. It is always, well, we could say here now, but we should remember that now or here isn't any place in particular. And now isn't any particular moment in time, but it is always now. And when we're just caught up in, say, the relative, we might be thinking of, boy, it was so nice 6 months ago. We didn't have this COVID thing. We weren't even aware of it. Nobody was even thinking about it. And how much easier life was at that time. All these kinds of thoughts. But that time that we think, yeah, what's back there somewhere last fall? And What we don't notice about that, not entirely, is that it doesn't exist last fall. What we're calling last fall exists now, because we're talking about it. But that's not ultimately real. It's not a real place, last fall, before the coronavirus. Or that time when I was freezing to death last winter. In the climate I live in, it's literally possible to freeze to death here. I spent some time in California in my younger days, and I noticed that people thought they were freezing to get death when it got down to 40 degrees above zero. I grew up with 40 degrees below zero, 80 degrees below that, so it wasn't too threatening to me. But still, we can feel these things, we can interpret things in this way. But it's all in this relative world. We don't realize that there is this place, as Tangshan is speaking of, this place where there's no cold or heat. Well, where is that? Of course, he's not talking about a place we can go to physically, move our bodies to some spot. Where on Earth? How well are we going to do if we try to get off the Earth? Where are you going to go? So where are you going to go on the Earth to get to this place where there's no cold and heat? Well, sure, we might find some balmy spot, that might last for a time. But we're really talking about these circumstances that seem to come and go, and that very often put us in situations where we don't want to be here, or it'll give us some situations that we say, well, we experienced it before, and I'd like to get that back. And we spend a great deal of time with that, never recognizing that we're always here. We're always in this place. And in this place, if we really see just what this is, there's neither cold nor heat, nor coronavirus, nor before the coronavirus, or after the time of the coronavirus, or this time it appears to be before the Antarctic ice sheets collapse and the oceans rise very quickly. Nor is it after we've settled down after such catastrophes go sweeping across the earth. Or while this seems to be taking place, some of the things that could very well befall us before very long. There's a place where there's no cold or heat, where there's no catastrophe. To say that there's no cold or heat isn't quite right, because that this first truth, this relative truth, is a truth. And there'll always be cold or heat or some oscillation between the two, or catastrophes or whatever. This is the samsaric world that we don't escape. This is the muddy water we live in. But what do we do? Is it possible to live here in such a place as this? And, well, to be at ease here in this place that otherwise would seem to hold so many threats and unexpected occurrences that could come our way at any moment. And what do? We can learn to open up to this reality that we're normally shut down to. Well, it's not even so much that we're shut down to, you actually can't shut it off. This is a perceptual experience. But the problem that we have is we get so caught up in the stuff that we cling to, ourselves, loved ones, objects and possessions that we might have. Working our way up some kind of ladder on our career path or something like this, where we're trying to achieve this or trying to achieve that, or to persuade people politically to move in this direction or that direction. We're so caught up in these things, and I'm not saying any of these things are wrong or bad and we shouldn't engage ourselves in such behaviors and things. But we should not lose sight in the awakened. Those who wake up to this reality are not fooled by it, not perplexed by it, or cowed by it, or obsessed or frightened or whatever else by what's taking place here. They don't reach for anything here to save themselves or to bolster themselves or to put themselves at ease, because any kind of ease we might find by arranging the furniture here in this samsaric world, it might make you feel better for the moment, but it doesn't last. And there's nothing wrong with arranging it so you feel a little better for the time being. Make a nice evening for yourself or something, whatever. Perfectly fine. But there is this place that we can wake up to. It's right here now. You're looking at it. I don't mean that you're looking at me or something like that. I mean, whatever it is that you see, whatever it is that's right before you, whether it's a beautiful scene like the one behind me, at least I think it's beautiful. It's a split rock lighthouse up on the north shore of Lake Superior. I grew up in this region, so it's beautiful to me. But whether it's beautiful or something we might think is ugly, or frightening or whatever, it doesn't matter. We can live in such a way that we're free of these things and we're not tossed about. And if the COVID virus comes sweeping through, or no doubt there'll be other things, and I think such things of major scale are going to be coming our way in the coming years and decades. But it is a way to live where you're directly facing reality. You're looking right at it. You're not blinding yourself to the possibilities on the horizon or what is unfolding right before your eyes, and where you don't need to be tossed away by it or obsessed with gathering up certain portions of it to appease whatever the thing it is that you're trying to appease within yourself or whatever else. We can live calmly and simply with wisdom and compassion, where we can deeply feel the life of the world. Deeply feel, this reaches back to what I was talking about, why I'm not too keen on sitting meditation, feeling like we're substituting other people sitting in the room with us with a computer that other people are also tuned into at the same time. Because you can learn to really feel. And if you do, this is an exercise I would give you if any of you are still thinking along those lines. If you've been in a room with people who are meditating, feel that. To get yourself out of the picture and just be there with what is taking place, opening up totally to that. And I'll do that sitting with a computer somewhere. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but they don't feel the same. There's something radically different between those two situations. It's a subtle thing. It's easy to miss. Wouldn't even think about it. Maybe if we do, it seems absurd. But you can feel this. You can quiet your mind and settle your mind in such a way that you're really in touch, not just through your thinking and believing and grasping, but through actually experiencing and being aware of this direct experience. You can do this at any time. It doesn't have to be in a cross-legged position on the floor or anything like that, though that can help, only because to minimize your activity from time to time is very helpful. To really settle down with what is actually unfolding all the time, because we're always here. We've never been anywhere else. We've always been in this place. Well, anyway, but this is what I want to bring us back to. Tangshan here, getting back to the koan here. So the monk asks him, so where is this place where there's no cold or heat? And Tangshan says, he said, when it's cold, let cold kill you. It sounds a little severe, perhaps. And when hot, let the heat kill you, he's saying. But what he's saying here, normally when it's cold, we're thinking, I'm cold. I want to do something about this. Yeah, again, well, sure, put on some extra clothing, put a log on the fire, whatever. Yeah, that's fine. But it's your mind. Look at your mind. Your mind is cold. Your mind is agitated. Your mind is fighting against us. I don't want this. I don't like this. Certainly. Here's where we are so much of the time. Or when it's too hot. I grew up in a kind of a cold place. For me, it was quite an adjustment moving to Minneapolis. To me, it's like the tropics. I can hardly bear it in the summer. At least it was when I first moved there. Gotten used to these tropics now down here. But, and we can do that. We can adjust to these things. But in the end, it's your mind that is being tossed about by things like cold and heat. When if we really live out of the life of the mind, and I don't mean necessarily your mind, there is this true mind, which is the life of the world. We can wake up to that and live out of that. And in such a place as this, to say that there's cold or heat or to be bothered by it, I mean, yes, we could see such this contrasts are still appearances. These are still appearing. But that they have to take you or disturb you or frighten you. And all of these kinds of things terrify you, drive you to behaviors that aren't helpful for you or that you might foist upon your children and others out of just sheer terror and panic, trying to make the situation better. These things are not going to help you at all. They will only make your terror and problems worse. You can find out right now just through settling down. Of course, at first, if you do sit down, settle down, if you haven't done this before, you'll find out as soon as you sit down and try to just focus on breathing in, breathing out. You'll see just how crazed and wild your mind is. But after you do this for a while, that will begin to change. It might even go totally quiet once in a while. I've been doing this over 50 years, but is my mind always quiet? No, it's not. Things will still come up, but not like it once was, where I'm driven, terrified, or obsessed, angered, or whatever. These things don't have to grip us. And then we can have a mind that is ready to face the world and whatever might be coming our way, coming up. Because this isn't about putting the blinders on or escaping or trying to dream up some wonderful paradise that we can go to or live in or whatever. All of these things are the stuff that just keeps us upset and obsessed and worried. It's all of that we can learn to just step away from. Just see it for what it is and realize that you don't need to be caught up in it. Little by little, we can learn to live with this, with the COVID. Or as, again, I still don't know if it was Zen Master. I spoke of this recently. I don't know if it was on a Sunday talk or in the class, but my Dharma brother Norm, he would know. But it was a Japanese Zen Master who no doubt probably was in Japan at the time of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But he said, even if an atomic bomb goes off over your head, your true nature will not be destroyed. We can live with this kind of knowledge, and this is actual knowledge, as we've been looking at in the Two Truths class. Not dreamed up knowledge, not conceptual knowledge, but in living out of the realization of the nature of what's actually unfolding here, what's actually being experienced here. It doesn't matter, the atomic bomb over your head, or the COVID virus, or the flooding of the rising of the oceans fairly quickly, whatever it is, other more lethal diseases sweeping through the population, or the sudden depreciation of the of food sources around the world and this sort of thing. Any number of things can come this way. And stuff like this could very likely. But you can find a mind. You can go to this place where there's no cold or heat. Cold and heat still appear. You can still feel their pangs or whatever, or the warmth and coolness that might be of comfort to us. You can feel all that still. But the things that toss us away, that disturb us, that leave us mystified as to what is going on here? What is this all about? Where do we go after death? All of these things can be eased and brought into stillness and quietness, where you actually know what the situation is, and you won't even have such questions as those. This is going to the place where there is no cold or heat that Tangshan was talking about. Well, I guess maybe I've talked long enough. Perhaps there's some questions out there.
Hi, yeah. So the thing that occurred to me, the statement was sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha. Is that applicable in this situation?
Yes. Yeah, I might be talking about that in the Tuesday class, but that's another example of the two truths right there. Yeah, sun-faced, always showing the same face, and it's steady. This is a pattern we can look for, like the sun face. It's just always sun face. It's just steady like this. Moon's face is, changing. It's oscillating, waxing and waning. There's other ways of looking at that same koan too, which I might mention in the class. But those two aspects is another example of in our teachings how it's pointing to the two truths. There's many other examples as well, where the two truths aren't explicitly stated. But what's interesting there in that one, I write about this in my first book, How the World Can Be the Way. Well, that was if you wanted to look at it, I'd get the remake of it, Why the World Doesn't Seem to Make Sense. But in that book, I talk about this pattern. And I use the example of like a straight line like this and then a wavering one over it. That this pattern of where there's something steady within the moment, within the system that might be operating, as a scientist might look at it. But in this moment, there's something steady and unwavering here. That's always the case. And then there's everything else that's taking place. Most of the time, that's all we see is all this stuff that's oscillating and changing, and we're caught with that. And that's where all our anger and fear and worry and fret and obsession and all of that, that's where all that takes place. But with that, and when we're carried away by all of that, we don't notice that there's also something right here in the same space that is steady and unwavering. And there's all sorts of examples of that. It shows up like here where I live, at least where I grew up, there are all kinds of maple trees, and you'll never see two maple trees that look alike, and yet they all look like maple trees. They're leaves. You don't see any, two leaves alike. Pick up any two maple leaves in the fall that have fallen from the trees or whatever, hold them up, any number of them. You'll never find two alike, and yet they all look like maple leaves. And it goes on and on, snowflakes and the clouds, and it is on and on and on and on and on and on. And the way that we think, the patterns of how we carry on with our thinking and our emotions, these all show these kinds of patterns where but if we look at it in the proper way, we're looking at it kind of in the whole picture. There's something in that that's not a thing, it's not a particular thing, but we can see it there, that is steady and unchanging, sun-faced. And so that teaching itself, just pointing to the same thing. And of course that was Baso, I believe, Zen master, on his deathbed, I think, if I remember right. And so I don't know, some official, I think, came in to see him and said, well, hi, how are you doing? Whatever. He said, sun-faced Buddha, moon-faced Buddha. He knew. In the midst of all this changing and coming and going, and here he's about to die, he also sees sun-faced Buddha. And I'm sure he spoke rather quietly and calmly to the minister or whoever it was that came to see him. So that's just one more example of how it shows up in our teaching, but also I just spit out a few examples there of how it shows up in the world around us. And there's many other examples too. It's in our DNA. You can look for this. There's something steady there and there's something changing. And it just goes on and on and on. Wherever we see this pattern, we are looking at the nature of the nature of the two truths, which actually aren't really even separated. That's the ultimate truth, is to finally wake up to that. So, but yeah, so that teaching is very pertinent to what I talked about today and to what we'll be looking at in the Two Truths class. So does that help, Martin?
Absolutely, thanks.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Hi, Steve. A minister from another pathway might suggest that we put our faith in the Lord or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some overlap possibly between what you're saying and what such a minister might say, but I think there's a difference.
Absolutely.
Could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, to put your faith in something. See, I never asked any of us to put our faith in something. That will, that's part of the samsaric world. If it's something, if it's some particular thing that's separated from other things, of course, we might think that, well, God isn't separate from us. Well, maybe not. But then what are you talking about here? And do we need to keep putting something there? I never put, and it's not in our teachings, that we put something there. That is the ultimate truth. We can't, because the moment you say something like that, you've made it relative. You're referring to something relative. And now you have some kind of a relationship with it. And now maybe you want to find a way to establish just what that is. And are there certain things that I need to do? And also the one will be greater and the one will be lesser. Again, I mentioned that I got a question this week, and I'll talk about it in the class tomorrow night, but where somebody was asking, well, is the one truth, how do they put it? It was the greater truth and the other one, the lesser. Well, they didn't use that term, but I guess that would be the implication. But that's not the way to see this. It isn't like the absolute is an object out there. It's holy, it's total, it's other, all of this. It's there isn't something like that. Because what we're talking about is just this. It's right here, right now. It has the appearance of coming and going, but there's actually no particularness. There's no substantiality, no substantial thing that is coming or going, and no thing that is kind of holding the whole ball of wax here or controlling it, or something that we can put ourselves. The Buddha spoke of this sort of thing as being other dependent. If you imagine some other of some sort, whether it's God, you know, you're gonna have to try to define that term without that falling apart, and that's virtually impossible, really. if you give it whole, if Nagarjuna gets hold of anything you might say there, he'll show that this is all false. So whatever you're constructing, it's self-contradictory. So we can't really put anything there that we're going to put our heart and mind into, or that we buy into in some way. We're left with disease, the dis-ease in the back. Well, there's a disease, it's mental disease in the back of our minds. There'll be a great unease about the situation that we find ourselves in. What I was pointing to today, this place where there's no cold or heat, was just to say it's a place, but it's not a place exactly. Language forces us to say something here. But there isn't anything of some particular substantiality, but it is just this as we're sitting here right now. It looks like coming and going. It feels like coming and going. It tastes like it. It smells like it. It gives us the thoughts and feelings of coming and going. But there's nothing that's actually doing the coming and the going. We can see this and wake up to this. And that's the absolute aspect of our understanding, or what we're experiencing here, is kind of seeping through at that point. What we have to learn to do is to give up on hanging to the separate ideas, and in particular this idea of me, the sense we have of myself. That keeps us obsessed with now trying to please it and to protect it and all of that. And in the frenzy of our mind, trying to, particularly when things start to go awry, as they might be for most of us now on this planet, It's kind of hard to keep that steady. This thing that we call myself, we're really, we can easily start winging out and get desperate, reach for this or reach for that. But you don't need to do any of these things. We only need to just sit down and look directly at what the experience is. And it isn't what we normally think. It isn't what we think at all. That's why I wrote a book that's titled Buddhism is Not What You Think. I really should have put the word about in the title, I guess. It's not about what you think. And whatever it is we think, that's delusion. That's what my teacher said that once after a talk he gave. And everybody laughed. I started laughing, but then I realized he was dead serious. This is not about what you think or what I think. This is what we can see and realize directly. And I hope I didn't give anybody anything that you feel like you can grip, because it's not my intention. I just want you to slow down and look carefully at the life that you're experiencing from moment to moment. And you'll find something very steady in that. And if you do, you won't have the kind of difficulties that otherwise will just toss us away totally. And it will be actual knowledge. So it won't be something that leaves us with a bit of unrest or still have a question in the back of our mind. And if you believe in what do you call it, God or something else, it's still, if you look carefully, there's still a question mark there. We might not want to look at it, but it's there. But it's possible to live in such a way that you're free of that. You're not relying on anything. I was going to mention, I don't know but the Buddha refers to this as being other dependent, which he identified as being a very unstable kind of mind, a mind filled with deep suffering, that we're depending on something else. That's why the Buddha also said, don't depend on me, don't believe me just because, you think I'm cool or whatever, or other people do, or they call me the Buddha or whatever. See for yourself. And because it's right here within our immediate direct experience. We only need to just wake up to just what that is. In a sense, we're already awake to it, because it isn't like it's blocked from us anyway, but it's just that we're constantly distracted by all the little things going on around us that keep taking us away and keep forming us back into a self. So it's just a matter of seeing. So I don't know, did that help, Ken?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Steve, heard you talk about varying practices that can aid in cultivating a mind that's conducive to awakening. I've heard you talk about going into nature, for instance, and in the past, we've talked about sesshin, for the long run. And I'm just wondering, in a particular circumstance like this, if you have any recommendations or thoughts on supplementary practices in addition to maintaining regular meditation that are conducive to deepening the practice in a circumstance like this.
Well, yeah, again, as you said, that the kind of I don't know, whatever words I'm going to apply here, I don't know if they really apply so well, but I was going to say the core of the meditation would be to take up the regular practice. But there's problems with that, because then you can it starts to appear like that what we're doing is something special or something of that sort. But don't think of it in that way at all. But just to take those times on a regular basis, this is the most important factor, that you do this on a regular basis, that you sit down in meditation. And again, it's helpful if you can do this with others, but do this on a regular basis. And then watch your mind, particularly when you're thinking about this, judging this or that, or you're judging yourself, you're judging others, the situation we're in or whatever. Just watch these things. Okay, that's the basic thing to do when we're not occupied with other things. But then, now this applies to what you were asking there, Joe. I think that, of course, we're not going to just sit on our cushion all day, and I don't recommend it either. But just doing that on a regular basis, a modest amount on a regular basis, I think is really the most helpful thing that you can do. But you can then take that mind into other activities as well. And when I talk about nature, it's perhaps easier when we're out in nature. We're surrounded by things. Most of the things we're surrounded by are there not as a result of somebody intending to put it there, but it's just the way that the whole has functioned in such a way that there's a tree here and a rock there and whatever it might be. We come into the city, everything's planned and laid out. There's a lot of intention, and then we're constructing and reconstructing and changing and moving this and that. There's a lot of there's a different kind of environment that we're in. We can feel the difference. Again, I won't say that this is bad or wrong. It's not as good as nature. I'm not talking in these terms at all. I'm just pointing out that this is what it's like in these different surroundings. And in general, to take that base thing that I described where we can just settle down, it doesn't have to necessarily be in a cross-legged position or whatever, particularly say if you're driving your car or you're talking with somebody out on the sidewalk or whatever. None of that, but we can come back to that mind. We can remember to bring ourselves back to that mind of meditation, that, as Dogen says, it has nothing to do with sitting or lying down. We can get better and better at reminding ourselves of that and coming back to that. But of course, in that moment, we might be engaged in a conversation or in doing some particular thing, in various ways, doing the dishes. It could be just some mundane sort of thing. But we take care of that, but at the same time, we're doing this with a settled mind and with some presence, awareness of what it is that's taking place. We might have to take a moment to, make some plans for the future, for tomorrow or tomorrow night. You're going to meet somebody or whatever, have dinner here. Of course, these days, can't do too much of that kind of stuff, but yeah, that'll probably come back. But, so things like that will occur, and that's perfectly fine. But even there, in between those moments, still see if you can come back. Just bring yourself back, not necessarily back to sitting in Zazen, in the cross-legged posture, but just bring yourself back to right here, what's taking place right here. And that involves, and this is the most important element that I wouldn't call it the regularity of coming back is the most important element, but this is right there with it. And that is to watch your mind. And because if you're back, you're laying out the dishes on the table for dinner or whatever, but if you're obsessed with something or you're angry about something or you're apprehensive about, things that are coming, just be aware of that state of mind that you have. Don't scold yourself for it or try to drive it off or anything, but just be aware of it. And to the extent that we start watching our minds in a compassionate way and in a settled sort of way, our minds will over time generally, over time they will, begin to settle out, calm down, So then when we do come back to the cushion and sit down, over time we start to realize, this is a different mind than I had when I took this up some time ago. It doesn't chase all over for the entire Zazen period. It doesn't, when it does move around, it doesn't go too far, and then it realizes what it's doing. It comes back. So gradually, we're cultivating a mind that is really here, and this is where we're living out our life. It's right here, right now. It's in this here and now, this place where we never leave. And we don't have to spend quite as much time in the past or anticipating the future. Though we don't ignore these things, but when we are looking at the past, it's right here because you're looking at it now. Same thing whether you're anticipating the future. And of course, if we are anticipating the future, we should never lose sight of the fact that it might not at all unfold the way that we're imagining or fearing or whatever else. So that's what I would say. So it's basically the same core activity of just calming down, settling down, getting yourself, if you can, depends on what the activity might be at the moment, but to get into kind of an alert posture. You're sitting upright, and whether it's in a chair or whatever, and then just be aware, and to be aware of the breathing, just breathing in, breathing out is the place just to settle the mind. If thoughts are coming up, just be aware of those. Don't be bothered by them or obsessed. Don't get the idea that you have to drive them away or anything of that sort. So I don't know. Does that help, Joe?
Yep, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Vince.
Always
see you.
good to see and hear you. How can I perceive what's never been discovered yet? Well, let's say a vaccine for the coronavirus or something like that, or new stars. But how can I be perceptual of distant galaxies or snake species that never occurred? The possibility.
Well, the perception never gives us any objects. Okay. It is just that the mind is up and running. This is not nothing. The world is alive and awake, and it's this. And this is the place we've always been, and this is what's taking place here. You and me don't show up here as individuated things that are persisting in time. All the stuff, the books behind you and the shelves behind you there, and all of these individuated things, and the shelves themselves, and your glasses. I'm just naming the things I'm seeing here now. But these are not things unto themselves. They appear to be, and they exhibit certain kinds of factors. There's heft and color and shape and all sorts of things there. But this is all kind of mentally constructed, and it's in the book that I gave you there. You got the manuscript of this book I did. So, but you might want to go back and look. I do believe I have it kind of laid out in there. It's quite a bit to try to deal with here now, but we don't get an understanding of reality through the words or through the concepts. It's purely perceptual.
Differently.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. Thanks, Vince. Good to see you.
It's good seeing you.
Thank you.